I wanted to spend a few minutes and talk about the latest version of the button scripts that are used to unfold the model during the videos. First there was one button, then there was two buttons, and then three buttons, and at one point in time it actually got up to 7 buttons, and it was just more than I could deal with. So it's been integrated together and reduced back down to 4 buttons, and I'll talk about them. So that the intent of the buttons is to unfold the model with or without the comments. So now that when one clicks on setup, it says, do you want to unfold the model? You tell it yes. And then it says, do you want to display the notes? And you also tell it yes. So that when you click on display, it walks through and unfolds the model in the order that has been defined and the notes that go along with each element that is unfolded. And then when it finally finishes, you can click it all day and it doesn't say anything. Now, you could tell it no to the first question, in which case it just walks through the notes. It doesn't unfold the model, it just leaves the whole model in view. You could tell it that you want to unfold the model but you don't want the notes, in which case it just unfolds the model and doesn't display the notes. Or you could tell it no to both of them, and you might ask, well, why would I bother to do that? If you simply wanted all of the notes, you need to click on setup before you can do anything else. But the all button will create you a list of all of the notes for all of the primitives that have been defined in the sequence in the order that they're defined, in case you want to copy the whole set of notes somewhere else. And as a reminder, any of the models that you find in Insight Maker, they belong to the person who created them, and you cannot change them unless someone explicitly gives you modification rights to the model. Though any model that you find in Insight Maker, if you want to evolve it into something else, you want to use all the pieces of it, you can click on duplicate insight and it will make a copy of it that will in fact belong to you. So let me get into a little bit more detail on how one builds this set of buttons. Because a button is a button, if you click on it, it actually activates the script associated with it. So you can either drag and select around it, drag around it to select it, or you can click a shift key and click on it, which will select it, and then you get to see the properties of the button over here on the right. Now the action for this, let me go ahead and make this a little larger so it's easier to see. The action associated with this button is that the first two commands toggle the sidebar and the top bar to close them if you're doing a simulation where you in fact want to access the control panel during the time that you're using it. You'll want to delete these two statements at the top. The rest of this is simply to go ahead and define the array of objects, which says that the first thing I do is I take all of these objects and I set the opacity of them to 10, which is relatively dim. And you can use this opacity anywhere from 0 to 100 as appropriate for what you're trying to do. As for the array of elements that it's supposed to function on, that's the purpose of the Show ID button. So I can select an element, click on Show ID, and it gives me an object definition appropriate to go into that array with the note vector, the note array undefined, and an opacity of 100. So if I want something else, I used 100 because that's what I use more often than not, and if I want to set it to something else, I can set it after I copy it. Now if I wanted a number of items, I can select multiple items, and it will then give me all of those items that can be operated on at one time. Or I can hold the control key and I can select multiple items. Well, sometimes I can. There, and then Show ID will give me those 3 items. And as for the notes, notice that here in this definition. On the 0 object, n is 29, and I don't know why that's there. I think, okay, that's probably an error on my part. For the rest of them, this is n is 4, that I want the 4th object displayed, the 5th object, the notes, and you can in fact have them as null. In other words, there doesn't have to be an object definition or a note definition, and nothing will be displayed. Or you can actually have multiple of them displayed, depending upon what you're trying to accomplish. I think this might be an old script that I was still messing around with. The display script itself simply walks through and looks at the global variables and finds the next set of objects or notes and displays them, and then resets the global variable and waits for you to select it the next time. The all button walks through the array of objects and simply builds a string that's displayed in the other window, in the all window here, and puts the titles in bold. And the show ID button is simply does a show prompt, and it gets the ID number of those primitives that you have selected, and it forms that string, and it forms it in a way so that it's already selected, and all you have to do is Control C to copy it so that you can paste it into the array that you're working on. Now, in terms of creating these buttons, you can in fact, select an object, do show ID, do a copy, close this, and then you can open setup and paste it into the appropriate array element that you want to be the next one in the sequence, though that gets real tedious in a hurry. I usually have a text editor open, and I put this portion of the script definition into that text editor, and I'll copy from this prompt window and paste over there. And the items run from 0 to however many you need. You can have 0 or 50 in this sequence. All you have to do is make sure that you set Imax to the value of the last one in the sequence, and make sure that there aren't any missing in the sequence. As to how you create these buttons, and then after I finish getting that all set up in the text file, I just copy it over, bring it over here, and replace this portion of the array with the definition that I've decided I want to use. In terms of creating the buttons themselves, they were in a well, here's a button that gets you to the wiki page that was initially created to go along with unfolding a model, and all of the scripts used to be here in the wiki page, and they were extremely difficult to copy out of the wiki page. So I have put them in a script file, the button scripts, which you can access via this button or a link in the wiki page. Notice I've also included the 6-button set of scripts that you'll find in a lot of the videos, because I don't know, if you might want to use the older version. But to use them, all I have to do is go here and copy this set of scripts, and then my option is I can create a button, and I can paste that in as the action for the button, and then click the button, and it will create me the 4 buttons. And it creates, and the only button that you need to modify is the setup button, and all you need to change is the definition of this array. So this is using a button to create the buttons. And once you've created them, you can then delete this because you no longer need it. The alternative way to create these buttons is that if you can access the JavaScript console in your browser, which you can do in Chrome from the menu here someplace, or you can do Control Shift J, which opens the JavaScript console. Then I can simply paste that script in the console and hit the enter key, and it creates me the 4 buttons. And then once I create the 4 buttons, I actually go ahead and copy this portion over into a text file and begin defining the elements of it by selecting something and doing a show ID and copying this and pasting it. Now note that when you first do this, usually you want to select all the objects that you're going to display the notes for or unfold, and they all get defined in the first element of the array, and I usually set them to 10 so that they're dim, but you can still see them. If you set them to 0 and you're making a mistake in the process of putting the array together, you may in fact have a difficult time actually trying to find the element that you've made an opacity of 0, so it's completely not visible. So there's a quick rundown, well, not actually so quick, not nearly as quick as I wanted it to be, an overview of the new set of buttons. And this particular model will I'll leave this one so that the model's around, you can access it. And the original stuff is here in modeling and simulation with Insight Maker, in additional tools, in unfolding a model, and I'll add a couple more links here, and I'll put the links back in the wiki page itself. There's the button scripts, and I'll link this video in right here. So hope you have found this informative. I have been looking for, it's since Insight Maker was originated 3 years ago, this is the one aspect of the environment that I wanted from day one, was the ability to unfold a model so I could describe it to someone piece by piece by piece as it was unfolded, as opposed to having the whole model in view and trying to get somebody to focus on the particular piece that you want to talk about. So I'm quite pleased with it, and I hope you find it useful, and if you have questions about it, send me an email. Bye. See you in the next video.